Thanks, Sam, and thank you, Dr. Rao, for a very enlightening discussion before this. And thanks for having me here. My name is Prabhjeet. I'll probably take the next 8 to 9 minutes and talk to you about two things. One is a bit about Uber and what our vision is. As a tech company, we believe we stumbled upon an opportunity to help improve the quality of life, at the same time help create economic opportunities for several million people. And then in the second part, just touch upon what I believe might be a few learnings in terms of what we are doing as a tech company, which may be relevant for all healthcare players to adopt. Again, we are ourselves in a very early stage of our journey, and there's a lot we can learn from professionals like yourself. But I'll still try and touch upon the role of technology, especially when trying to implement the kind of very stringent processes which Dr. Rao touched upon, but at scale and with people who may or may not directly be your employees or directly under your influence. Just quick background, Uber is a small company with about only 7 years presence across 80 plus countries with operations in 500 plus cities, and we have a set of 2 million plus partners on our platform who are helping move the cities we operate in. So we look at ourselves as a platform business, slightly different from traditional businesses. Think of FMCG company, which I consider as a pipes business. A pipes business is you manufacture something at one end of a pipe and the service gets delivered through a distribution chain at the other end of the pipe. We are a platform business, very much like many of the healthcare businesses, very much like a hospital itself, where the art of the service being produced is at the same time when the service is being consumed. And those are the things that are happening in parallel. The difference for us is it happens not just in parallel, but it happens with millions of riders and drivers, none of whom are physically in direct contact with us. And that makes it both an interesting problem to solve, at the same time kind of creates opportunities for technology to do disruption. What excites us? Why we believe there is huge power of technology to drive disruption? If you look around, I think India is a great example. Today, most of us would have a car or have an aspiration to have a car. But the reality is a private car is kept idle for 95% of the time. It is only 5% of the time that a physical asset like a car is being utilized. And even for that 5% of the time when a car is being utilized, if you look around, and I do this experiment every time when I'm at a traffic jam, and do a quick test, I've always found, and the research always shows that on an average, an occupied car has only 1.2 passengers, when the potential capacity of a typical car will be 5 passengers. That to me is the opportunity, where we are pumping in assets around us, we are taking away green space, we are taking away space for people to move around, because cars deserve those spaces, but the reality is that asset is getting utilized to up to 98% times lesser than what it has the potential. And that's where we believe technology fits in. And this is where we have embarked on a mission. And to be honest, it's not that this was a mission which we started off with. Origin of Uber was on a rainy evening in Paris when our co-founders, Garrett Camp and Travis Kalanick, they came out of a conference just like this, and it was raining very heavily. And they said, I wish there was a way for me to get a car at the press of a button. So one thing led to the other. The business was incubated, it was tested out. It took us an year to just perfect the business in San Francisco. And then in 3 years, we scaled it up from 1 city to 500 plus cities. And as we did that, we began to realize the importance and the potential of what this platform can do. So one side is being able to imagine if I can utilize that asset better, I can get for every car which is already there, even if I get them to utilize 5x better, I'm taking off 60 cars for every 100 cars off the road. On the other side, the moment I am able to do that, I'm also creating economic opportunities, because if the car is sitting idle, there's an individual who's looking for an economic opportunity. I can create economic opportunities for hundreds and thousands of people to just drive the car on their own terms and create that extra income. And as we do this, because the asset is being utilized better, there are no new fixed costs. The cost of running, which is the cost which a rider has to pay, actually keeps going down, which means more and more people can keep using the platform. And in the process, the holy trinity of the rider, the driver, and Uber as a platform begins to kind of work seamlessly. So as we look at it, there are 5 ways we believe we are helping make cities better, or at least have started on a journey. We're probably less than 1% of where we want it to be. One is just complementing public transit. So if you look at cities like Delhi, Bangalore, which are bursting at the seams, the governments are investing behind high quality infrastructure. However, the biggest issue has been last mile connectivity. Imagine a world where you have a uniform set of Ubers moving around the city, consistently moving between all last mile points. Imagine all the metro stations, railway station, even the airport, and the asset is utilized 24 hours. Different people are sitting in the car, two drivers doing two shifts, picking up passengers all the time, and the vehicle is consistently moving. In the process, you've actually given back space, and you've created a much more cheaper alternative to what would traditionally be considered as a more effective last mile transport. The second thing which excites me is carpooling. The way technology can now help us match is, traditionally we've all used cars, we've kind of joined our friends, family, neighbors while they're going from point A to point B and said, if you're going in one direction, why don't we go together? But the power of technology is that I can match not just people who know each other, but absolutely perfectly strangers. And where that adds is, then I don't have to make an asset wait just for them to find a person who's going in that direction. Because if two people, one in Gurgaon phase 1, another in Gurgaon phase 3, open the app and they're trying to come to Dwarka at a similar time, the algorithm can real-time figure out, look, if I can match them and give them the same car and get them to share it, then it's cheaper for them. It's better for the driver because his earnings go up, and it's better for the cities because now I have to have one lesser car going in that direction. So we are very excited about the opportunity of Pool. This is a service which we have launched in 6 of our cities in India and been around for about 15 odd months. 25% of our rides in cities like Delhi and Bangalore are already on Uber Pool. So 25% of the passengers, and those are 25% of millions of riders who are on a daily basis just sharing their rides with absolutely different strangers and heading in the same direction. The third thing which excites me about the power of this platform is the impact on drunk driving. The graph behind me shows on black, what are the timings when most number of alcohol-related fatalities happen. This is from the US. We don't have this data easily available in India. And this is also the time which shows when do Ubers get utilized maximum. They're obviously at a different time zone. And research has clearly proven, done independently, that having Uber in a city has helped reduce drunken fatalities anywhere from 6 to 18%, depending on which city you have it. So here is something which we, again, as we begin to see the power of the platform and being able to create alternative means, we are ending up making cities phenomenally better. One of the questions I often get asked is, oh, you want to match two different people, two strangers going in the same direction, or you want to match a rider with an unknown driver, how safe are you? Again, the answer to me is simple. At the end of the day, technology helps create a system which is safer than any other alternative available. And how is that? Take an example of booking an Uber, which some of you may have taken. Before the ride, you actually know who's the driver, you know what his or her star rating is, which is how have other riders rated the person, the details of the vehicle. During the trip, you can share the details of your trip with your friends and family so they can track you live. During the trip, you have the ability to have access to any emergency SOS which connects to all the relevant authorities, which often respond within 120 seconds is the SLA which we work at. And then post the trip, and that's where the power of it comes, is you have the ability to give a rating to the driver, which is a feedback, which gets used by algorithms, by machines, which then decide whether this kind of a driver or a rider should be on the platform. And by the way, it is not just for one side of the platform. Our customers are both riders on one side and drivers on the other. The same way you as a rider get to rate a driver at the end of a trip, and that rating gets into the database, the same way the driver is actually rating the rider. We often have cases which do not get discussed that much in public domain, is where we also have certain set of riders who create disturbance for the drivers, and those ratings then get added up, and we are able to decide what kind of access should be provided to that platform. And again, this is without any manual intervention. Dr. Rao talked about great checklists, about using certain logic. The scale at which we are operating, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of being able to create those checklists, but that's where the machines come in. Each city which we launch in has anywhere from only 3 to 5 people running a business which has more than 1 million trips a week, because the product itself is figuring out and the algorithms themselves are figuring out which is the right quality of driver, the right quality of rider, and then matching them appropriately. Now, what does it mean in terms of learning? Look, I'm not a healthcare professional, so I would, with all humility, not claim to be able to tell what are the learnings which are relevant. But outside, and here are a few thoughts which kind of came to my mind, which might be mantras which may be relevant, especially as you think of future of healthcare, where technology and healthcare will begin to emerge. An analogy for me before I get into this is what we often call internally as our business. Unlike a Google or a Facebook or a Twitter, which is a pure play tech company, we often tell ourselves that the business which we run is about bits and atoms. Bits from the digital world clashing with the atoms from the physical world, because that's what we do. On one side, we may have the best of the systems, but at the same time, the reality is a service is being delivered in the physical world. In some form, that's what healthcare is getting to. You'll have more sophisticated bits running the background analytics for you, but the reality of the service delivery, the personal touch, the touch between the doctor and the patient, the nurse and the patient will always be in the physical world. So there are those analogies on the bits and the atoms, and often they clash, but more often than not, they come together to form music. So few takeaways for me, I think what I'll just to leave for this group is, one is around efficiency. One of the big core focus for us is how do we continue to get more out of the asset which we have. The same holds for healthcare. You invest behind super expensive assets. Are there ways for you to utilize those assets better? Can you turn around the same hospital bed 3 times over in a week versus 2.5 times, and that extra half goes in actually enabling us to serve somebody else? And in the process, you keep bringing the cost of healthcare down while increasing the profits for the provider. The way we do it, an illustration of that, a simple illustration is today when a Uber driver is about to finish a trip, suppose ending at Taj in Dwarka. We have pushed efficiency and utilization to that level that even before he or she finishes the trip, there is a chance that he can get the next trip, because there is a rider in the vicinity who's already at that point trying to book an Uber. And what that does is I have hereby saved, even if I've saved 2.5 minutes of that person from dropping the previous passenger and getting back, if I can able to shave off 2.5 minutes of every other ride, in the process I'm able to actually put much lesser assets on the door and can get a lot more trips done. I think the same obsession with asset utilization is something which will make healthcare successful and make the profits in a way that you bring the cost of healthcare down for others. Second is about service excellence. I think the healthcare providers in India do a fantastic job at that. But the way, one analogy to look at is, I've often seen, and as a layman, as a patient, my interaction when the feedback is collected from me at a healthcare point, and recently I was out at a hospital for a family incident. The feedback was collected after the process was done. Are there ways in which you can actually collect feedback without being disruptive and integrate into the entire service delivery experience, which helps you break down that if you have 113 steps of service delivery, which is the one which is creating the biggest pain for the patient, or maybe on the other end, even for the nurse or the doctor who's providing that. The third, I think this resonates with the theme of this conference itself, of monitor, measure, and improve. This is something which we take as the core heart of the business. There is no product feature which gets rolled out without being tested with what we call the A/B testing approach. The only product we have is a simple app. Now, in that app, the choice of where I put the icon for booking a car on the top left-hand corner versus the top right-hand corner, the bottom left-hand, bottom right-hand corner, is a real design choice. The same way you have a choice to say, how do you manage the customer experience when he or she walks in? How does the layout work out? What happens when you kind of change your scheduling through the week, etc., in terms of how the OTs get allocated? The way we end up looking at this is, let the best answer win in a real testing environment. So at any point of time, there are hundreds and thousands of tests which we are doing. For example, the way we will do it is we'll put it out there in the real environment. An app version with the icon on the top left-hand corner, and an app version with an icon which is 2 millimeters below. And let's see how the riders respond and how the drivers respond to that. So that becomes a philosophy. And again, technology should help enable that. Last but not the least is, how do you begin to think of the entire experience as a full journey, where in case of a hospital, you actually have two stakeholders, a service provider and a service receiver, and you kind of get them to be on a platform and get both of them to mutually be accountable to each other. Last but not the least, this is my personal appeal. I thought I'd use the opportunity to, given all the main influencers in the healthcare industry are there. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment I enter a hospital or a healthcare provision, the first thing I see is thousands of cars bursting out of all parking lots, and that is probably the first negative experience which I have as a patient. I think the future of mobility is the one where you will actually not require a single car. We are working with tons of hospitals, etc. in the US, where we work with them to say, you get rid of your parking lot, take that space and expand your infrastructure for healthcare, and let people come in and go out in an Uber, because that will help you save all the parking lots. I think that's the future. Look forward to some of you kind of taking that up and fast forwarding to the future. Thank you.